Give thanks to God who is good, whose mercy endures forever, whose love expands with the expanding universe, whose mercy endures forever, whose breath gives life to matter, whose mercy endures forever, who animates life with spirit, whose mercy endures forever, who plants a fierce unrest in our hearts, whose mercy endures forever, who bends the universe towards justice, whose mercy endures forever, who holds the whole world and our hearts, whose mercy endures forever. Give thanks to God who is good, whose mercy endures forever. I've got this reading here. Is there anybody in the congregation who knows this passage and would love to read it?
I will.
Great. There's 2 slides, so I'll follow you.
Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her.
Now, this morning, I need to open the sermon in prayer. Dear God, before COVID, I was able to take months or years to articulate the insights I would gain late at night as I ponder your mystery and held the Sacred Heart in my heart and prayers. But since you requested that I step into this role as bridge pastor during these turbulent and dangerous times, I'm being forced to share my understanding as it comes to me. So please, dear God, Sophia, speak through the words that I say, the songs that I share. May what I say be reverent, truthful, and useful to those who kindly listen. I am convinced that the loving wisdom that comes out does not come from me, it comes from you. So please show up again today. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O my beloved God. Amen. The passage where Jesus and Mary Magdalene meet, he meets her in her suffering, in her tears, and calls her by name. And he says, "Mary, why are you weeping?" And asks of his story. He's a bringer of condolences to her, as well as the resurrection. And this is an experience that millions of people have had with the Christ. Today is the day that we mark the fact that Jesus Christ, a human, Jesus of Nazareth, that we call, when he was alive, we call Jesus Christ now. We changed the calendars to mark how important this is. But after his death, he is referred to as Christ Jesus. And we are celebrating that transition with Easter. In the way he lived and died, somehow he merges with the source of all that is, the light that was there in the beginning that we just heard about from Genesis. And the blueprint of our divinity that had always been programmed into us starts to quicken into matter. The resurrection of the body is hugely important, but it's a teaching that I theologically know next to nothing about from a theological. I've not had any training at seminary on incarnation whatsoever. So for me to share my understandings of this, I need to share stuff with an unorthodox Christian perspective. And I hope that you will take this out of the box insights that I share and integrate them into your own beliefs. I'm so aware, I'm going to move to gallery for a second, that many of you amazing people have been Christian longer than I've been on this planet. I'm 45 and I'm aware of your wisdom and the fact that I am actually very young. And I hope that my reflections can be useful to you. One thing I know from Iona, a teaching from Iona that John Philip Newell talks about all the time is matter matters. Spiritual ideas have to be brought into the lives of real people. God cannot reside in some heaven light years away. And God is not an untouchable superhero human who will save us from ourselves. This idea needs to go because it is helping create the problem. When we hurt, shoot, maim, plunder the rest of creation, God allows this to unfold. The shootings in Atlanta and Colorado happen. September 11th and the aftermath backlash of fascism becomes real. The preciousness of life, every life, matters. And not just the human lives, all life, the matter of this living planet. Now this teaching comes out of the passion of George MacLeod. He was the founder of the community who now reside in the Abbey, where I used to live. He was a soldier in World War I. He was the darling of the church, and he did not choose the powerful church in Edinburgh. He went to the poorest part of Glasgow instead. And he was absolutely horrified by the atomic bomb. And he felt that it was urgent that humanity awaken to its Christhood so that we don't destroy ourselves, that the dice had changed. They were loaded now. And fast forward 50 years, you add the desperation of the destruction of our living planet to this need to wake up. We need to protect our food source, the air, the water itself. Matter matters. The resurrection of the body of God within us is very important. And the resurrection in the Easter story is central to that. Now, before I get into my own spiritual insights that arrived last night about 3 a.m, I'm a little bit tired, by the way. I have to tell you that I have never met the Christ described in the reading that we just heard with scars in his hands. But I have met somebody who did. When I lived on Iona, we had this beautiful asylum seeker called Razor. He was there for about a year. He was from Iran, and he told me this story that was so similar to that reading that Claire just read, about how his conversion to Christianity happened because in his sorrow, in the middle of his locked room, the Christ appeared in flesh on his bed. And I said, was there an imprint where he was sitting down? And he said, yes, this was as real as you are to me. And I tell you this story because it's not my own experience, but I hold in the mystery the possibility that that could be so. It's not good to make our beliefs limited. My own personal experience of resurrection is much more like the other Easter Sunday story, which is the road to Emmaus, which I'm going to share now. Thank you, Claire, for reading before, because that means I can read now. Now that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that happened. As they were talking and discussing these things with each other, Jesus himself came and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, called Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who had said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the woman said, but they did not see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophecies have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he was going further, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went to stay with them. And when he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were our hearts not burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opening the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what has happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. I have met the resurrected Christ in the company of a few very, very holy people who radiated compassion, healing, truth, and wisdom. It poured out of them. They are what drew me to Christianity in the first place. I was not interested in this, what I thought was homophobic and judgmental religion, which of course is not what it should be. These holy men and women had something that was very sparkly and beautiful. They revealed a face of compassionate action that had hope in it. But with time I learned that this outpouring of compassion was just 50% of the picture. There was another internal side of things going on for these people. I once heard Cynthia Bourgeault talking about this in a podcast. She said that there is an intimacy with God, or oneing as Julian of Norwich would call it. And this intimacy turned inwards is sacred union, maybe what people would call prayer. And in its outer expression, it takes the form of compassion, compassionate action. What these people, these holy people, see is that there is nowhere that God is not. The suffering of Christ continues to be poured out, and they respond to that suffering. Social justice might be what you would call this oneing if you looked at the behavior from the outside, but really it's a holding of the Sacred Heart. I think about these people that hold this quality of love that is so astonishingly beautiful that you can't miss. They are almost shiny. And I've said this before, but you know their presence because it makes you want to cry. There's more than just kindness. There's an understanding of a bigger truth. They access a larger mind. Don't get me wrong, they go about their lives as ordinary people, but within their lives, a force of compassion exists that is unstoppable, wise, and irresistible. Healing was the quality that one holy woman gave to me. I say she for the holy woman now, because there's one person in particular who reached out and touched me with her intuitive kindness and bravery. And I decided to open my heart to the loving kindness too, in reciprocation and gratitude for this. Life had brought me to my knees, so I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. So over the years I've met this presence, this feeling of love that is so pure and powerful and intelligent, and I call it the Christ or the Christ consciousness. I can't explain it logically, but I don't need to because it burns in my heart, just as was described by the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. Now, part of the reason I started praying so sincerely at the start of this sermon is because I'm in the middle of experiencing my own Passion Easter experience myself, as I'm sure some of you are too. And as I meditate upon it, there's details that are quickening in my heart, and I really want to share them. But it's hard to talk about, let alone preach about. In these past few days, as I've been looking at Judas's betrayal, the Last Supper, the ordeal of suffering, and the death and the tearing of the fabric of reality in Jesus' death, there's a feeling rising in me that makes me want to rewrite the Easter affirmation, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. No, it should be Christ is rising. They are rising indeed. Christ is rising. They are rising indeed. What I'm witnessing this year in my heart as I pray with the scripture is Mother Mary's presence, holding, witnessing, dying, and being resurrected herself. In this story, there isn't just a man suffering, but his mother who's pouring out her life force into him at great cost. She is being internally crucified too, and the church never talks about this. Now, one time in the year 2000, I was walking down a cobbled street in Dublin, and I was arm in arm with my mother. It was we were trying to have a healing retreat because I'd just come out as trans and she wasn't coping with it, and she asked me if I would go on a mother-daughter retreat. And even though I didn't like her use of language, I said yes. Now, maybe you don't know that I'm transgender. If you don't know that detail, this story isn't going to make any sense. So we're walking down arm in arm, and all of a sudden I notice I'm being tripped and I fall behind. And then I'm tripped again, and I turn around and I see this man, and I say, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to trip you." And he immediately puts me in head lock and drags me off to an alley, and my mother continues to walk on. And he's about to beat the crap out of me. And he looks at me with my blue hair and says in his thick accent, Eastern European accent, "Are you a girl?" And I don't say anything. And he says again, "Are you a girl?" And I say, "Yes." And he lets me go, and I run off to my mother. I have to tell you, I was almost beaten up in front of my mother. It was one of the most awful moments of my life, in which I replayed the scene of actually being beaten up if this guy had not noticed my birth gender. The suffering that Jesus faces in his death is incredibly important. because he bore the worst of human evils, betrayal, wrongful imprisonment, lies, humiliation, torture, rejection, and he offers this up in absolute forgiveness. Kind of like a Buddhist Tonglen prayer where you take your own suffering and you bless those who are suffering alongside you. And I've known that this was vitally important for a long time because it allows us to be met in our own suffering. But I'd never thought about the fact it's not just Jesus that's walking this. Mary is also walking and witnessing. She's there. The point of Easter with this insight of Mother Mary is not that Jesus suffered for us as a substitute, that he suffers with us in solidarity, just as she does with her son. But it doesn't stop there. There's something more that caught my attention. I've been writing this song called the Magnificat. I'll just play you a little piece of it. And I've been recording it this Easter. Now you'll remember the Magnificat from Advent. It's where the Archangel Gabriel comes to Mary and she makes this bold prophecy about the Christ consciousness. And the church just assumes that she's speaking about the work of her son. And no, she's embodying it in herself. She's giving birth to it in herself. I've been writing this into song for about a year. And you know, when it came up at Easter and the timing for recording it was now, I thought that was strange. But then I realized that Christ consciousness is in her too. And we need that. We need that fierce mama bear. My soul shall praise and magnify you, Lord. Yes, I will come. Yes, I have come. I hear your voice is calling out my name into my life. You shall be born. All generations praise to hold with me the beating heart, the sacred heart. My soul is placed into this fire of love. Yes, it becomes God's will be done. Here's the prophecy. The rich cannot receive what they don't own. Let me try that again. The proud cannot hear beyond their words, their thoughts enclosed, so stale and old. And the rich cannot receive what they don't own, the spaciousness, this emptiness. Spread out the feast, let those in hunger come. Your face be shown, and your love made known. The humble hear your voice, with you they sing. Magnificat, Magnificat. All generations praise to hold with me the sacred heart, my beating heart. My soul is placed into this fire of love. Yes, it becomes God's will be done. So reach out to touch the world that is to come. Magnificat, Magnificat. The risen Christ is amplified in all our hearts. Christ is rising. They are rising indeed.
Christ the